Dominic Wells stared at the glossy Forbes magazine on his marble countertop, his own face staring back at him with that practiced CEO smile. Tech titan Dominic Wells, the loneliest man in Silicon Valley, the headline mocked. He grabbed the magazine and hurled it across his penthouse, watching it flutter pathetically to the floor beside his half-eaten takeout. 38 years old, worth $300 million, and eating cold kung pao chicken alone at midnight. Again, his phone buzzed. Another match on the dating app his assistant Rachel had forced him to download. He swiped without looking. They were all the same, anyway. Women who saw dollar signs instead of a person. Women who wanted photos with him for Instagram clout. Women who asked about his vacation homes before they asked his favorite color. The penthouse felt suffocating tonight. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering San Francisco skyline, but all Dominic saw was his own reflection in the glass. A man in an expensive suit, standing alone in a beautiful cage he'd built for himself. His mind wandered to the storage unit across town where he'd shoved all his old paintings 5 years ago. Watercolors, mostly. Landscapes that had once made him feel alive. His father's voice echoed in his memory, sharp and dismissive. Art doesn't build empires, son. Tech does. Get serious or get left behind. So he'd gotten serious. He'd built Wells Digital Solutions from nothing into a tech empire. He'd made his father proud right up until the old man's heart attack 3 years ago. And now what? Now he sat alone in this glass tower, wondering what the hell it had all been for. The next morning, Rachel Martinez stormed into his office with that look on her face. The one that meant she was about to mother hen him whether he liked it or not. She'd been his executive assistant for 12 years, and somewhere along the way, she'd become the only real friend he had left. One more date, Rachel announced, setting a latte on his desk with enough force to slosh foam over the rim. I've already set it up. Elena Chun. She's an art teacher at Lincoln High. And before you start with your excuses, she doesn't know who you are. Dominic looked up from his laptop, exhausted already, and it wasn't even 9 in the morning. Rachel, please. I can't do another dinner where someone asks me to invest in their cryptocurrency scheme or their wellness startup. She doesn't know your last name, Rachel continued, ignoring his protest. I told her you're just Dominic, works in tech consulting. That's it. No Google-able information. No Wikipedia page. Just you. Something in her voice made him pause. Rachel looked genuinely worried. Not just annoyed or bossy like usual, but actually concerned. He followed her gaze to the corner of his office, where 3 empty coffee cups sat next to a pillow and blanket. He'd slept here 2 nights this week. You ate soup from a can last night, Rachel said quietly, at your $20,000 dining table, while video conferencing with Tokyo. Dom, this isn't living. This is just existing. The words hit harder than they should have. Dominic ran a hand through his hair, feeling suddenly older than 38. Fine. 1 date. But when this fails spectacularly, you're buying me canned soup for a month. Rachel's face broke into a relieved smile. Deal. Tonight, 7 p.m., the Sterling Room. The Sterling Room? Rachel, that's your usual place, I know. Just go. And Dom. She paused at the door. Try to be a person, not a CEO. Just for 1 night. Across the city, Elena Chin splattered cerulean blue across her canvas, with more force than strictly necessary. Her tiny apartment studio looked like a paint factory had exploded. Canvases lined every wall, some finished, most abandoned halfway through. This particular piece was for her students' fundraiser auction, and it was going terribly. You're stress painting again, her roommate Lily observed from the doorway, still in her scrubs from her nursing shift. What happened? Did Principal Morrison deny your supply budget again? Worse. Elena jabbed her brush at the canvas. You set me up on another blind date, didn't you? Rachel called me this afternoon. Lily had the grace to look slightly guilty. Hear me out. The last guy you set me up with asked me to quit teaching because art isn't a real career path for a serious woman. Elena made air quotes with paint-covered fingers, leaving blue streaks in the air. His name was Derek. He worked in finance. He wore a Rolex that cost more than my car and talked about his portfolio for 45 minutes straight. This one's different, Lily insisted, moving into the apartment and plopping onto their threadbare couch. Rachel's known him for years. She says he's actually a good guy, just lonely. Like you. I'm not lonely, Elena protested, but even she didn't believe it. She looked around her studio apartment, filled with art supplies and half-graded student papers and not much else. When was the last time she'd gone out for something other than groceries or school events? When was the last time she'd painted something just for herself, not for her students or a fundraiser or someone else's expectations? One drink, Lily pressed. 60 minutes. If he's terrible, text me the eggplant emoji and I'll call with a fake emergency. Then we'll get Thai food and watch terrible reality TV. Deal. Elena sighed, setting down her brush. The painting was ruined anyway. One drink. 60 minutes. That's it. His name is Dominic, Lily added. He works in tech. That's literally all I know. That evening, Dominic arrived at the Sterling Room 15 minutes late because of a crisis call from his Tokyo office. The maitre d' recognized him immediately, of course, ushering him past the waiting crowd with obsequious enthusiasm that made Dominic's skin crawl. He hated this. The bowing and scraping, the fake smiles, the way people treated him like he was more important than them just because he had more zeros in his bank account. He spotted her immediately. She was the only woman in the restaurant not wearing designer labels or checking her reflection in a compact mirror. Elena Chun sat at the corner table in a simple floral dress that looked like it came from Target, her black hair pulled back in a practical bun, studying the menu with an expression of barely concealed horror. Dominic knew that look. She'd just seen the prices. Elena. Dominic approached the table, offering his most professional smile. The one he used in board meetings. The one that didn't reach his eyes. She looked up, and for a split second, he saw something flicker across her face. Recognition? Disappointment? She recovered quickly, standing to shake his hand. Dominic. Hi. Sorry, this menu is in French. It's pretentious, Dominic said, surprising himself with his honesty. I'll translate if you want. They sat. The waiter appeared instantly, hovering with a kind of attention that made normal conversation impossible. Dominic ordered wine without asking Elena's preference, a habit so ingrained he didn't even notice until he saw her face tighten slightly. She ordered the cheapest salad on the menu, $42 for some lettuce and vinaigrette. He watched her swallow hard when the waiter left. So, Dominic said, falling into his default mode. CEO mode. Interview mode. The persona that had served him well for 15 years. Rachel tells me you're a teacher. Art, right? That must be fulfilling. God, he sounded like a robot. Even he could hear it. It is, Elena replied, her voice careful, guarded. I teach high school. Sophomores mostly. They're at that age where they either fall in love with creating or decide art is stupid and pointless. And which camp wins? Depends on the day. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes either. They were both performing, dancing around each other like strangers at a networking event. The wine arrived. Dominic took a sip. Elena took a larger gulp. The silence stretched between them, awkward and painful. Do you enjoy it? Dominic tried again. The tech industry, I mean. Rachel said you work in consulting. He blinked. She turned the question back on him. When was the last time someone had asked him about his actual feelings? It pays well. That's not what I asked. Their eyes met across the table. For the first time all evening, something real passed between them. A recognition of mutual misery. They were both dying here, suffocating under the weight of expectations and performance. The appetizers arrived. Dominic couldn't even remember ordering them. Elena pushed hers around her plate, clearly not enjoying whatever tiny, artfully arranged thing the chef had created. He watched her check her phone subtly, probably texting her roommate for rescue. This was a disaster. Another disaster in a long line of disasters. Why did he keep doing this to himself? I need to take this call, Dominic lied, standing abruptly when his phone didn't ring. Work emergency. I'll just be a moment. He escaped the bathroom, gripping the marble sink and staring at his reflection. Same expensive suit. Same exhausted eyes. Same man who couldn't figure out how to have a normal conversation with a beautiful woman without turning it into a business transaction. His phone actually did buzz. A text from Rachel. How's it going? He typed back, it's not. When he returned to the table 5 minutes later, Elena was texting too. He caught a glimpse of her screen before she could hide it. Send help. This is painful. Something inside him cracked. Maybe it was the honesty of her text. Maybe it was his own exhaustion with the pretense. Maybe it was the way she looked just as miserable as he felt. Whatever it was, Dominic sat down and said the first real thing he'd said all evening. This is awful, isn't it? Elena's head snapped up, eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it, maintain the polite fiction they'd been constructing. Then her shoulders sagged with relief. Spectacularly awful, she admitted. I'm sorry. I'm sure you're very nice, but I feel like I'm at a job interview where I'm definitely not getting hired. Dominic laughed. Actually laughed, not the polite chuckle he used in meetings. I'm the one who should apologize. I don't know how to turn off CEO mode. I've been interrogating you like you're applying for a position at my company. Wait, you're actually a CEO. Elena's eyes widened. Rachel said you were in consulting. I am. Was. It's complicated. Dominic ran his hand through his hair, messing up the carefully styled look. I'm terrible at this. Dating, I mean. I default to business mode because it's the only mode I know anymore. Elena set down her fork, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. It was the look of someone actually seeing him, not just the suit and the resume. I ordered a salad I don't even want because I'm terrified of looking like I'm after your money, which I just realized I'm not supposed to know you have. They both laughed then. Real laughter that drew annoyed glances from the couple at the next table who were trying to maintain their own romantic ambience. Do you want to get out of here? The words tumbled out of Dominic's mouth before he could stop them. I know a place. Well, I don't know a place, but we could find a place. A place that doesn't charge $50 for lettuce. Elena was already grabbing her purse. God, yes. Please. Before they bring out whatever main course you ordered that I can't pronounce. Dominic left $500 on the table for their barely touched meals and followed Elena out into the cool San Francisco evening. The moment they stepped outside, he loosened his tie, and she kicked off her uncomfortable heels, dangling them from her fingers. I have no idea where we're going, Elena admitted, laughing as they walked down the sidewalk. I just knew I couldn't sit in there for another minute pretending to understand why truffle oil makes everything cost $100 more. There, Dominic pointed. Across the street, a dumpling cart sent steam rising into the night air. An elderly Chinese woman stood behind it, calling out to passers-by in Cantonese. Have you ever had street dumplings? Elena's face lit up. That's my favorite cart. I come here after late-night parent-teacher conferences. Mrs. Wong makes the best pork and chive dumplings in the city. I've never had them, Dominic admitted. I've walked past this cart 1,000 times on my way to business dinners, but I've never stopped. Then you've been missing out. Elena grabbed his hand without thinking, pulling him across the street. Her hand was warm and paint-stained, and Dominic realized with a start that no one had touched him casually like this in months. Maybe years. Mrs. Wong's face broke into a huge smile when she saw Elena. They exchanged rapid Cantonese, Mrs. Wong's eyes flickering to Dominic with obvious curiosity and approval. Elena ordered for both of them, and minutes later they were sitting on a bench with paper plates of steaming dumplings, plastic forks, and napkins. This is the best first date I've had in years, Dominic said, biting into a dumpling and nearly burning his tongue. And we're eating $4 food on a street corner. That's because it's real, Elena said. She'd relaxed completely, sitting cross-legged on the bench with her bare feet tucked under her dress. No performance. No pretending. Just dumplings and conversation. So let's have a real conversation then. Dominic set down his plate, turning to face her. Who are you when you're not teaching? What do you do just for yourself? Elena paused mid-bite, considering the question with an intensity that suggested no one had asked her in a long time. I paint. Or I used to paint for myself. Now I mostly paint for fundraisers or examples for my students or birthday presents for my roommate. I can't remember the last time I painted something just because I wanted to see it exist. What would you paint? If you could paint anything right now. This, Elena said immediately, gesturing to the street scene around them. The steam rising from Mrs. Wong's cart. The way the street lights make everything glow gold. You, with dumpling grease on your expensive tie, looking more relaxed than you probably have in months. She stopped, blushing. Sorry. Artist brain. I see everything as a potential painting. Don't apologize, Dominic said quietly. That's beautiful. The way you see the world, I mean. He looked down at his tie, at the grease stain she'd mentioned, and laughed. This tie cost $300. I've been terrified of ruining it for 2 years. And now it's got dumpling grease on it, and I don't even care. $300 for a tie. Elena's eyes went wide. I could buy art supplies for my entire classroom for a month with that. See, that's the thing, Dominic said, warming to the topic. I have all this money, and I don't even know what it's for anymore. I buy expensive ties and eat at fancy restaurants and live in a penthouse that feels like a museum. But I can't remember the last time I felt alive. Really alive. When did you last do something just because you wanted to? Elena asked. Not because you had to, or because it was good for business, or because someone expected it. Just because it made you happy. The question hit Dominic like a physical blow. He sat there, dumpling forgotten, searching his memory. Board meetings, investor calls, networking dinners, charity galas where he wrote checks and posed for photos, business trips to Tokyo, London, New York. When had he last done something purely for joy? I used to paint, he finally said, the words catching in his throat. Watercolors. Landscapes mostly. I wanted to be an artist once. Not a tech consultant or a CEO. Just someone who made beautiful things. What happened? Elena's voice was gentle, but her eyes were sharp with understanding. My father happened. He said art doesn't build empires. That I needed to be practical, serious. That painting was a hobby, not a life. Dominic laughed bitterly. So I went into tech, built a company, made him proud. And then he died 3 years ago. And I realized I'd built this entire life trying to please a man who's not even here anymore. That's the saddest thing I've heard all week, Elena said. And I teach teenagers going through breakups. Despite himself, Dominic laughed. Really laughed. The sound surprised him, bubbling up from somewhere deep he'd forgotten existed. We're a mess, aren't we? The best kind, Elena agreed, smiling at him over her dumplings. The kind that knows we're a mess and keeps going anyway. They talked for 2 more hours on that bench. About Elena's students, the ones who broke her heart because she couldn't save them all. About Dominic's company, the deals that made him rich but left him empty. About dreams deferred and passions abandoned. About loneliness in crowded rooms and the exhaustion of wearing masks all day. I had this ex, Elena said as they walked slowly back toward the restaurant district. Derek. He wanted me to quit teaching. Said I was wasting my degree, that I should do something more prestigious. He wanted the idea of dating a teacher, you know? The cute fantasy. But he didn't want the reality. The late nights grading papers. The paint under my fingernails. The way I cry at student graduations. You cry at graduations? Dominic asked. Every single one. Ugly cry. My students make fun of me. Elena's voice was fierce with pride. But these kids, some of them are the first in their families to graduate high school. Some of them, I'm the only adult who's told them they're talented, that they matter. So yes, I cry. Because it matters. Dominic stopped walking. They were standing under a streetlight, the city humming around them. And he looked at this woman in her Target dress with paint-stained fingers and bare feet, and something shifted in his chest. Something that had been locked tight for years started to crack open. I want to see you again, he said. Not at a fancy restaurant. Not performing for each other. Just this. Real conversation and cheap dumplings and you telling me about your students. Elena studied his face for a long moment. Okay, but I have conditions. No expensive gifts. No trying to fix my problems with your money. And you have to be honest with me. The real you, not the CEO version. Deal, Dominic said immediately. Can I walk you to your car? I took the bus, Elena admitted. My car is temperamental, and I didn't trust it not to break down on a first date. Let me call you a car then. Please. It's late. Elena hesitated, then nodded. While they waited for the rideshare, Dominic did something he hadn't done in years. He pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app, and he started writing. Not business notes or meeting agendas. Just observations. The way the streetlight caught in Elena's hair. The sound of her laugh. The feeling of being seen, really seen, for the first time in forever. What are you writing? Elena asked, peeking over his shoulder. Reminders, Dominic said, of what it feels like to be alive. The next 3 weeks felt like waking up from a long sleep. Dominic found himself checking his phone constantly, not for stock alerts or board member emails, but for text from Elena. They fell into an easy rhythm. Coffee before her morning classes. Lunch in Golden Gate Park, where he'd bring his old sketchbook and she'd correct student papers. Late dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants where nobody knew his name. On their third date, they spread a blanket in the park, and Elena read to him from a poetry book her students had recommended. Dominic sketched while she read, his hands remembering movements he'd forced himself to forget. He drew the bridge, the sailboats on the bay, and finally, almost without meaning to, he drew her. You're good at this, Elena said, looking over at his sketch. Really good. This isn't rusty. This is talent. It feels rusty, Dominic admitted, but his heart was racing with something he'd almost forgotten. Pride. Not the hollow pride of closing a business deal, but the deep satisfaction of creating something with his own hands. You're alive when you draw, Elena observed. Your whole face changes. You stop looking like a CEO and start looking like you. I forgot I could be just me, Dominic said quietly. I've been Dominic Wells, tech titan, for so long that I forgot there was anyone else underneath. Elena reached over and took his hand, threading her paint-stained fingers through his. Hi, just Dominic. I'm just Elena. Nice to actually meet you. They kissed then, surrounded by tourists and joggers and barking dogs. It was nothing like the perfectly choreographed kisses Dominic had experienced at charity galas or corporate parties. It was messy and real and tasted like the coffee they'd been drinking. It was perfect. Come see my classroom, Elena said the next week. I want you to see where I spend most of my waking hours. Lincoln High School was nothing like Dominic's private school education. The building was old, the paint was peeling, and the hallways smelled like teenage anxiety and cafeteria food. But when Elena unlocked her art classroom, Dominic stepped into something magical. Every wall was covered in student work. Paintings, drawings, sculptures made from recycled materials. A corner was dedicated to a library of art books that Elena had clearly bought herself, the spines worn from use. Supplies were organized in old coffee cans and shoeboxes. A sign above the door read, Create boldly. Fail beautifully. Try again. This is incredible, Dominic said, turning slowly to take it all in. Elena, this is... Mr. Chen? Is that you? A teenage boy appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, suspicious eyes locked on Dominic. Ms. Chen, you okay? I'm fine, Marco, Elena said warmly. This is my friend Dominic. We were just leaving. What are you still doing here? It's almost 6. Needed to finish my portfolio piece, Marco said, still eyeing Dominic warily. The one for the scholarship competition. Can I see? Elena asked. Marco hesitated, then pulled out a canvas. It was a portrait of an elderly woman, rendered in bold, emotional strokes. The technique was rough, but the feeling was there. Raw and honest and real. Your grandmother? Elena asked gently. She died last month, Marco said, his voice cracking slightly. I wanted to remember her right, you know? Not just in my head. She left. The door closed quietly behind her, and Dominic was alone again in his glass tower. Exactly where he'd started. For weeks passed like a nightmare. Dominic kept the company. He shelved the art center project. He made the board happy. And he was absolutely miserable. Rachel found him one night, still at the office at 2 in the morning, staring at a blank computer screen. "You look like death," she said, setting coffee on his desk. "I kept everything," Dominic said hollowly. "The company, my position, the board's approval. I did exactly what they wanted." "Except yourself," Rachel said. "And Elena." "I don't know how to do this, Rachel. How to be both. The successful CEO and the person who paints and eats dumplings and actually gives a damn about something other than profit margins." Rachel sat down across from him. "You don't be both, Dom. You choose. Your father spent his whole life building this company. And he died alone, stressed, never happy. Is that what you want? To spend another 30 years building something that doesn't even make you happy?" After she left, Dominic sat in the darkness of his office. He thought about Marco painting his grandmother, about Elena buying art supplies with her own money, about the feeling of watercolor brush in his hand and the taste of cheap dumplings and the sound of real laughter. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out his old sketchbook. The drawings from the park, the portrait of Elena, evidence of a different life, a better life. Dominic picked up his phone and started typing an email to the board. His hands were shaking, but his mind was finally blessedly clear. The next morning, the boardroom was silent as Dominic stood at the head of the table. "So," Victor said smugly, "are we getting back to business? Refocusing on profit?" "No," Dominic said calmly. "I'm resigning. Effective immediately." The explosion of voices was immediate. Shock, anger, confusion. Victor's face turned an alarming shade of purple. "You're throwing away everything," Victor shouted. "No," Dominic said clearly. "I'm finally building what I should have built all along. Something that matters. Something I can be proud of." He walked out of his own boardroom for the last time. And with each step, the weight on his chest grew lighter. 2 months later, Dominic stood outside Lincoln High School with a portfolio tucked under his arm. His heart was pounding. He'd sold his penthouse, bought a modest loft in the Mission District, and spent every day since his resignation either painting or working with architects on the Community Art Center. It was real now. Construction had started. His savings were funding it. And he'd never been happier or more terrified. Elena came out of the building, laughing with a student. She froze when she saw him. "Hi," Dominic said. "I'm not here to ask you to take me back. Not yet. I'm here to show you something." They drove in silence to the construction site downtown. The old abandoned warehouse was half transformed now, walls bright with murals in progress. A sign out front read, "The Wells Community Art Center, opening spring 2025. "You built it," Elena whispered. "I couldn't save the company and my soul," Dominic said. "So I chose my soul. Free art classes. Supplies for every kid. Exhibition space for local artists. No profit motive. No board approval needed. Just art and community and actually making a difference." He opened his portfolio. Inside were dozens of watercolors, street scenes, portraits, and on every page, Elena, teaching, laughing, existing in the world with fierce, beautiful authenticity. "I've been painting every day," Dominic said. "You were right. I was choosing the cage. But I'm done with cages now. I'm done living someone else's life." Elena's hands shook as she looked through the paintings. Tears streamed down her face. "Dominic. I'm just Dominic now," he said. "Not a CEO. Not a tech titan. Just a guy who paints and wants to help kids create art and is completely, hopelessly in love with a teacher who changes the world every single day." Elena looked up at him, and the hope in her eyes nearly broke him. "Come with me," Dominic said, taking her hand. "One more place." The dumpling cart was exactly where it had always been. Mrs. Wong's face lit up when she saw them, shouting something in Cantonese that made Elena laugh through her tears. They sat on their bench with paper plates and plastic forks. The same bench where everything had started, where Dominic had first felt alive again. "This is where we began," Elena said softly. "This is where I met the real you," Dominic replied. "Where I started finding the real me." He pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple ring, handmade, with tiny painted brushstrokes etched into the band. He'd made it himself, working with a jeweler to get it right. Elena-chan, Dominic said, kneeling on the sidewalk beside their bench while Mrs. Wong cheered from her cart. I don't have a penthouse. I don't have a CEO title. I'm just a guy who paints, who wants to help kids discover art, and who is completely in love with you. Will you marry me? Elena was crying openly now. You know I'm keeping my job, right? And my terrible Honda that breaks down constantly. I wouldn't want it any other way. And you're teaching Saturday classes at the center. Kids need to see that artists can be anyone. Already on the schedule. And we're coming back to this dumpling cart on our anniversary. Every year. No fancy restaurants. It's a promise, Dominic said, laughing and crying at the same time. Then yes, Elena said. 1,000 times yes. They kissed while Mrs. Wong banged her spatula against her cart in celebration, while tourists took photos, while the city hummed around them. And Dominic felt what he'd been searching for his entire life. Not success, not approval, but wholeness. Home. 1 year later, the Wells Community Art Center opened to a crowd of 300 people. Students, teachers, artists, and community members filled the space. The walls blazed with color, every inch covered in murals painted by local kids. Elena taught the first class, her classroom supplies now funded by the center. Dominic stood in the back, sketching the scene, his heart full to bursting. That evening, they returned to their modest apartment in the Mission. No penthouse views. No marble counters. Just a cozy space filled with canvases, art supplies, and the evidence of a life lived fully. Do you miss it? Elena asked, curled up beside him on their worn couch. The money? The power? The penthouse? Dominic looked at her, at the simple wedding band on his finger, at his paintings covering their walls. He thought about the kids at the center today, painting with supplies they'd never been able to afford. About Marco, who'd won his scholarship and was heading to art school in the fall. About the feeling of waking up every morning, excited for the day ahead. I miss being empty, Dominic said, pulling Elena closer. Being alone in a glass tower, eating cold takeout, and wondering what the point of it all was? Not for a second. Good answer, Elena said, kissing him softly. Now come on. We promised Mrs. Wong we'd stop by tonight. It's dumpling anniversary. They walked hand in hand through the San Francisco streets, past the gleaming towers, where people like his old self worked late into the night. Past the fancy restaurants where they'd never eat. Toward a dumpling cart where an elderly woman would greet them like family. Toward a life built on authenticity, creativity, and love. Elena walked over and put her hand on Marco's shoulder. This is beautiful. This is the kind of work that wins scholarships. But more than that, this is the kind of work that keeps people alive in our hearts. She'd be proud of you. Marco nodded, blinking hard. Thanks, Miss Chun. I'll see you tomorrow. He left quickly, embarrassed by his emotion. Dominic stood frozen, watching the exchange. He'd just witnessed something he'd never seen in any boardroom or business deal. Real connection. Real impact. This wasn't about profit margins or market share. This was about a kid processing grief through art, guided by a teacher who saw him as a whole person, not just a student number. Most of these kids don't have art supplies at home, Elena said softly, turning back to her classroom. Their families can't afford them. So I buy them myself. Paintbrushes, canvases, colored pencils. Whatever they need to keep creating. How much would you need? Dominic asked before he could stop himself. To give every student a full supply kit. Elena's face hardened slightly. Don't. I didn't bring you here so you'd swoop in with money. I brought you here because this matters to me. Because I wanted you to understand who I am. I solve my own problems, Dominic. I don't need rescuing. The word stung, but Dominic understood. He'd been about to do exactly what she feared. Turn her struggle into something he could fix with a checkbook. Make himself feel better by throwing money at a problem instead of actually understanding it. I'm sorry, he said. You're right. I just seeing what you do here, what you give these kids. It matters. You matter. And you shouldn't have to drain your own bank account to do your job. But I do, Elena said simply. That's the reality of teaching. That's the reality of caring about something more than your paycheck. And I chose this. Every day, I choose this. Dominic looked at her, standing in her classroom, surrounded by her students' dreams rendered in paint and charcoal, and he fell completely in love with her. Not the polite attraction of their first date, not the easy affection of their park dates, but something deeper, something that terrified him. That night, Elena brought him dinner at his office during crisis. A major acquisition was falling apart. 200 employees were about to lose their jobs at the company Wells Digital was buying, deliberately laid off to increase valuation before the purchase. This deal would make us $40 million, Dominic said, staring at the spreadsheets. But it's built on destroying people's livelihoods. They fired workers to make the numbers look better. So you'd profit from people losing their jobs? Elena asked quietly. It's just business, Dominic said automatically. The phrase he'd used 1,000 times. The justification for every morally gray decision he'd ever made. Is it? Elena set down her takeout container. Or is it the difference between being successful and being someone you can respect in the mirror? The question hung in the air. Dominic looked at the contract on his screen. $40 million. His board would be thrilled. The shareholders would celebrate. And 200 families would struggle to pay rent. He thought about Marco, painting his grandmother's portrait with supplies Elena had bought herself. He thought about the dumpling cart and the park bench and the feeling of sketching just because it made him happy. He thought about the man he used to be, before empire building became more important than humanity. Dominic closed his laptop. I'm pulling out. Your board will be furious, Elena warned. Let them be furious. Dominic stood, walked around his desk, and pulled Elena into his arms. I'm done sacrificing my soul for other people's approval. I'm done choosing profit over principles. Elena looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his face. Who are you, Dominic Wells? I'm still figuring that out, he admitted. But I know I'm not the man who makes deals like this anymore. Not if it means losing myself. Not if it means losing you. They kissed in his sterile office, surrounded by screens and contracts and the trappings of his corporate life. And Dominic felt something shift. A choice being made. A path being chosen. 3 months later, that choice came back to haunt him. The board called an emergency meeting. Victor Pierce, the lead board member and Dominic's father's oldest friend, sat at the head of the conference table, with barely concealed rage on his face. You rejected 3 profitable acquisitions in 2 months, Victor said coldly. You're spending company resources researching community investment projects. And now I hear you're planning to fund some kind of art center? Dominic, this isn't a charity. This is a business. It can be both, Dominic said, but even he heard the uncertainty in his voice. No, it can't, Victor snapped. Your father built this company on hard decisions and smart investments. Not feelings. Not art projects. Business. I'm giving you a choice. Refocus on profit, drop this ridiculous community center idea, and get back to work. Or resign. The ultimatum hung in the air. Dominic looked around the table at the other board members. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked calculating. All of them wanted the same thing. The old Dominic. The one who made them rich without asking uncomfortable questions. I need time to think, Dominic said. You have 1 week, Victor replied. Then we vote. Dominic buried himself in work, tried to save everything. His company, his community project, his relationship with Elena. But the more he tried to hold on, the more everything slipped through his fingers. He worked 20-hour days. He canceled dates. He stopped sketching. He stopped going to the dumpling cart. He became, once again, the man Elena had met at the Sterling Room. You're doing it again, Elena said during their 4th canceled dinner in 2 weeks. They were in his penthouse, arguing while he paced and checked his phone obsessively. You're choosing the cage. I'm trying to save everything, Dominic shouted, his exhaustion boiling over into anger. The board, the company, our project, us. I'm trying to make it all work. You can't save everything by sacrificing who you are. Elena's voice cracked. My ex Derek wanted me to be less so he could be comfortable. I won't watch you make yourself less to please a board of people who don't even know you anymore. I'm not Derek. Dominic shot back. No, Elena said quietly, and the sadness in her voice cut deeper than anger ever could. You're worse. Because Derek never knew better. But you do. You felt what it's like to be free, to be yourself. And you're choosing to go back to the cage anyway. What do you want me to do? Dominic asked desperately. Walk away from everything I built? Everything my father. Your father is dead, Elena interrupted, and the bluntness of it shocked them both. He's been dead for 3 years, Dominic. How much longer are you going to live his life instead of yours? The truth of it struck Dominic like a fist to the chest. He stood there in his expensive penthouse, surrounded by success he didn't want, defending choices that were killing him inside. And he didn't know how to stop. Call me when you figure out who Dominic Wells really is, Elena said, tears streaming down her face. The painter, not the CEO. The man who ate dumplings with me, not the man who's afraid to disappoint people who don't actually care about him. Dominic had spent 15 years building an empire that left him hollow. It had taken Elena, a teacher with paint-stained hands and fierce compassion, to show him what real success looked like. Not in bank accounts or board meetings, but in moments. In dumplings on a bench. In student artwork. In the courage to choose your own path, even when everyone tells you you're crazy. He was finally, beautifully, completely alive. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring tales about finding yourself and choosing authenticity over empty success. Drop a comment below telling us about a time you chose your passion over expectations. We read every single one, and your story might inspire someone else to take that leap. Thanks for watching, and remember, the cage door is always open. You just have to be brave enough to walk through it.